And I just want to make a comment. It's wonderful. The more lighting we can add to an area, the safer an area is, because criminals don't like lighting. They like to be able to sneak up on you in the dark or get closer to you in the shadows, and then you walk by and you kind of become prey. So the more lighting, the better. Only downside to lighting, people need to have curtains or something, because nobody wants to have it like bright as day inside the front of their house. But overall, lighting is definitely safer for everyone.
Okay, everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, so this is Houston from the air in early 2019 on the right, and Tucson on the left. And Houston, as you can see, has no lighting controls. So every one of those white spots you see from the airplane is not lighting the ground. And actually most of it from the ground is seen as glare for if you're a driver, or glare in your windows. Tucson has very well controlled light. It is near some astronomical observatories, but is doing its best to keep the light on the ground and to keep glare out of people's eyes. So just to compare a dark sky city with the lighting ordinance on the left, Houston on the right, now let's look at what they look like on the ground. So Tucson actually has far better street visibility than Houston has. Not only is the glare controlled on the ground, these are their new 3000 K, that's a slightly whiter than warm white color. Street lights that they put in about in 2016. And not only that does the street light control glare, but also their businesses control glare. On the right is a scene from Gessner Street, a little bit south of Harwin at Town Park, I think is the name of the street. And that's one block of 3 blocks of apartment complexes that recently put in, it must be 75 or 100 white LED wall packs. And also we have our LED street lights are in the scene, but as you can see, the street visibility is not nearly as good. And this photo that's appeared on Twitter, it's not mine, shows how much light we waste in Houston. So as you can see from lit up downtown versus the darkness elsewhere during the freeze, we waste an enormous amount of light into the sky. And you can see that in the sky glow. So why do we need a lighting ordinance? Well, for one thing, I've not had a lot of success just educating 50 to 100 people at a time in a city of 4 million. An ordinance would be the fastest way to get education to people about how to use light to the best advantage, to see the best without any of the adverse effects of poor lighting. It would increase roadway safety. It's much better for human and animal health. It would also drive the demand for good quality lighting, which is a major problem. When people think they want bad lighting, that's what the lighting vendors will provide. So I really hope there's 1 or 2 policemen here, because I feel like the basic problem with Houston's poor lighting is that people think that environmentalists are asking them to light in a way that's 180 degrees away from people in charge of their safety are asking them to light, when they really should be congruent. We really could, I think, could get a lot farther with police education. I'll show you later that Art Acevedo was quite helpful in this matter. There's also no legal recourse right now. If someone's shining a really bright light into your bedroom, we have no way to legally get rid of it. We have one ordinance I'll talk about later, which is wholly inadequate with LED light. And a more beautiful city would attract more business. And once people see good lighting, they tend to like it. The problem is that we have so little in Houston to show them. So people have literally not seen good lighting for the most part in Houston. First of all, you need to know the term veiling luminance. We have had a change in calculation methods, and what they do is not only measure the amount of light on the ground, but measure how the eye perceives that light. So people think the light on the left is fine, but they don't, because they can see what they can see. They see the whole backyard. They don't even notice what they're missing is a man standing at the gate who is in both pictures. As soon as you hide the light from the glare from the light, you can suddenly see the man from the gate. That's the kind of design we would like to see in lighting, so that we eliminate the dark shadows and eliminate this fuzzy view from glare. This is a video made by Steve Goldberg, who's here, along with Jim King and his wife, Amelia. Before I play it, it's only 20 seconds. I feel like this 20 seconds gets across our entire education. I want you to focus on the pedestrian at the left and watch her walk from left to right. And notice what happens when she gets in front of the white security light. I say singular light because the second light is actually a reflection in the school window. So watch her visibility.
Okay. Ooh, it says recording, I guess.
That is a huge difference in visibility in my book.
Okay, so that shows that it's not quantity of light, but how light is used. And so how do we create a glare-free city? We shield the light, we ask for warmer color. I'll explain a little bit more about why later. And when you do those two things, the eye can see the light, the resulting light much better, and you need a lot less light to see better. So the problem with LED lighting is that it's highly directional. So what that means is that when we have glare from the previous lighting, it's glary, but when it's from LED lighting, it's what I call glare on steroids. So here's an example. One of the things, our projects to help convince the police that this is a problem is we are starting to photograph the lighting at fatal auto pedestrian sites in Houston. So this one was near my house. It's at Bel Air and Atwell. In this particular case, it was a drunk driver, but and this is what a car might see at the point he ran onto the sidewalk. But the light that you see at the Phillips 66 to its left is highly directional. So when it hits the driver hard, this is what you see. And you may not have noticed in either picture that there's a bus stop sign right here immediately to the left of the light. This is what a drunk driver who was driving a truck saw when that light hit his eyes directly. And I actually went there, I pointed out this light to the police. And since this light is directional, it hits you this way in a car about 2 blocks back. And if you're sitting a little bit higher up in a truck, it hits you about 1 block back. This is exactly where the driver ran off the road. He went parallel to the road on the sidewalk directly toward that light and hit a man on a mobility scooter. By the way, drunk drivers have twice the problems with glare as sober drivers because their eyes dilate. And so they have even more trouble when we have glare on the streets. This is that same apartment complex I showed you before. It was also the site of an auto pedestrian accident. Off to the left, a little bit out of the field, are 2 bus stops. Steve and I crossed the street at the crosswalk, but it was scary. There were 8 lanes of traffic coming at us in motion when we crossed with the walk sign. So I almost understand why people go jaywalk in the middle of the street and try to wait for traffic to stop. In this case, you would theoretically be able to see a pedestrian. The lights are coming at you sideways as you're driving from left to right or north on Gessner. The problem is noticing a pedestrian. So another problem is if you have too much distraction, you simply might not notice someone in your field of view. And we have a lot of distracting light in Houston. This was another one in that same area. I went there because I had heard that every witness said that that the accident appeared to be unintentional. A very large SUV dragged a man 130 feet. But look at the edge of I'm not sure about this. I sent this to Art Acevedo. I said, I don't know if this was the cause of the accident, but this is the lighting at the site of that accident. And he acknowledged it. There's this extraordinarily bright LED lighting around the windows at eye level for a driver. And it at best would have distracted the driver from maybe noticing a pedestrian and maybe prevented him from seeing it. And this is planned pedestrian driving or lighting by Houston Public Works for West Houston. This is at Memorial and Eldridge. Looks fine when you're a pedestrian, not too bad when you're a car right at the intersection, but this is what an approaching car sees. And it wasn't until Steve Goldberg and I went back to take this photo that I even noticed that there was a bus stop right there. In fact, there are bus stops on either side of the street. And hopefully the person would go to the crosswalk to cross, but it's a scary large intersection with lots of cars turning right and left. And directly across the street from each bus stop are the strip centers and the shopping. So there's a high likelihood that someone's going to try to jaywalk, and this driver is going to see. But just a quarter mile away is similar lighting, but all pointed down and warm. I wouldn't actually recommend this much clutter for a driver because of the confusion, even if it's shielded. So back to Tucson, I just want to let you know that the IES guidelines or they're just recommendations, they're not legal requirements, but for roadway lighting is called RP, probably for roadway and parking lot lighting 818, which would have more to do with the year that was released. Tucson lighting meets that standard, but does not exceed it. And they also kept their lighting down to 3000 K, which is a warmer color, and below throughout the city, which is recommended by the American Medical Association. As you can see, there's plenty of clarity still. They did not exceed the recommendation, as Houston is about double it, and so is Las Vegas, whom we consulted with, because what happens is as you go from sheer darkness to a certain amount of light, accidents drop precipitously at night, but after a very moderate amount of light, which is exactly the light recommended by RP 818, the accident level completely levels out. In some cases, even starts to go up again. So all you get is increased glare, increased spending on the light, and no improvement in accident rate. So how do we reduce glare beyond shielding? Color also helps. All of these light bulbs are the same intensity. They're all the same wattage. But as you go from the 6000 K, the bluer light, to the 2700 K, 4000 K is what Houston uses for its street lights. But what people didn't understand is when you multiply that by 179,000, that glare becomes cumulative. So some cities now are going for the warmer street light, still adequate clarity, but the glare is considerably reduced. Another thing that's new in RP 818 is they said that they have been telling cities in the past to use the scotopic curve for spectral sensitivity. So these curves tell you which light appears brightest to you under certain circumstances. The scotopic curve is for the fully dark adapted eye, like we amateur astronomers use, where you're only using you're out there for 30 minutes, you get completely dark adapted, you don't see color, you're only using your rods. They now realize that under street lighting, you still see color, that your things are well enough lit to see what color a car is. You're using photopic vision, and that curve actually peaks in the warmer part of the spectrum. So in chapter 2, they have a less colorful graph, but this graph, and they actually show that the old high pressure sodium was closest to the maximum spectral sensitivity. So all this blue-white lighting that people are using is way far down the curve for the type of vision we're using. That's contributing to this brightness. So you see a very bright light, and yet the parking lot underneath looks very sallow and not especially bright. So Los Angeles, when they went to the warmer streetlights in 2016, because of this phenomenon, was actually able to drop their wattage steadily. So at the bottom is 2016 lighting. We have the superseded lights at the bottom. They show their entire history of light on their website. Now they're for 150 watt high pressure sodium replacement, like the old amber lights we had, they're all the way down to the 60 and 34 watt range. Houston still is using the 95 right now. At least those are the ones on Braeswood near me. The other problem is health. We don't have a lot of time, but the main issue here is that when we're trying to sleep, we don't do well if the light outside is daylight colored. Yes, like the officer said, we could really block it out, but even a little bit coming around the edges of blinds is enough to keep you awake. And there's other issues besides not being able to sleep well. There's also cancer issues. The mechanism for that is that when melatonin is suppressed at night, which it is by that blue frequency light, that is a hormone which suppresses the growth of certain hormone-based cancers. Those include prostate, colorectal, and breast cancer. We have now measured in cities that were early adopters of white LED streetlights in Barcelona and Madrid, that the white lit neighborhoods have considerably higher cancer rates. So they have twice the prostate cancer, 1.5 times the breast cancer, and 60% higher colorectal cancer rates. They did find that really strong blackout shades mitigate that, but what happens is you lose your neighborhood awareness. It shouldn't be necessary to do that with the proper lighting. So again, this shows how the frequency of light we use, it peaks very close to the frequency of blue, which most suppresses melatonin. So I'm gonna skip this slide because we just already discussed it. Obviously, the Texas Medical Center has not yet gotten that memo. This is the Texas Medical Center from the new Blossom Hotel. And it's saturated in white light, which is really designed to keep all those hospital patients awake. It's also not like moonlight. Moonlight does not have the strong blue spike, which keeps us awake. LED lighting does, if it's in the wider frequencies. So because of all this, the American Medical Association, which I brought in the City Council in June 2016, strongly recommends that street lights and other exterior lighting be 3000 K or below due to the health and the glare issues. So what isn't blue or light sharper? Yes, that's shorter wavelength does make things appear sharper. It narrows your pupil. That also makes things appear sharper. But we have the glare issues, which cause more problems than they help. So as we can see, you don't have to have absolute white to have adequate sharpness for driving. This is Phoenix's new 2700K or soft white LED street lights after installation downtown. This is the best amber street lighting I've ever seen. I took this picture outside Las Cruces, New Mexico. You could look directly at the amber LEDs within these lights. You could get right up on top of them. There was no glare. And as you can see, there's great clarity on this parking lot. So I did want to mention that if we do a lighting ordinance, that the International Dark Sky Association and the Illuminating Engineering Society discuss lighting zones. But even though you might associate the Dark Sky Association with very dark areas, very small towns with dark sky parks, they understand the entire range of lighting that's needed. So they do not recommend something for podunk. They don't recommend that for a city center. So there's no fear that they're asking people to turn off all the lights so you can't see adequately in a big city. I have Jennifer Sotuyo. If we have a little time, I'd like to get to her. This is her Galleria area townhomes. Are you able to unmute, Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm here. This is just where I'm near Galleria off Fountain View. Fountain View near in between Richmond and Westheimer. And so we have a lot of bars and clubs around us. So as you can see, the lighting is really bad. But we recently, which I'm sure you all heard about, had a major accident in front of our townhomes. Oh, this is just how bad. The picture on the right-hand side is 10 o'clock at night. But you can tell by the shadows of the lawn furniture that it looks like daylight out there. And so, yes, so we did have a major accident that was covered nationwide. 3 valets were killed as a driver was speeding down the street. But in that first picture of the street, you could see that there was a really bright light from one of these clubs that's shining down the street. Again, as we had talked about earlier, it's just pointing straight. It's not even trying to light anything. It's just they tried to get the most powerful light that they could, not realizing that it creates major blind spots. And so this driver was coming. And when you're driving, anybody, even when I'm coming home from work, I cannot see anybody in the street. So I have to drive very carefully. But if you're not from this area, you wouldn't know that. And so tragically, 3 valets were killed. And there's a lot that, of course, surrounds that accident. But all of us in this neighborhood truly believe nobody probably even saw the valets because of that light. But not only does that light create a blind spot as you're driving, it also creates a blind spot at the front of our property. So we have a lot of neighbors that walk their dogs, and a group of people could be hiding and you would have no idea that they're there because the light is so strong and blinding that it creates these major dark pockets. So it's really sad.
So there are solutions. There's very few really good lights in Houston, but I'm going to show you a little bit of solutions and some of the good lighting that we do have in Houston. I estimate that about 70% of our glare is on hinged lights. We could immediately mitigate that by simply asking people to turn those downward. This is in West Texas as an example of what that would look like. Here's some hinged lights near me at Beechnut and Bissonnette. And those could all be turned down. Actually, as it turns out, since we took this picture, and actually they're pointed right and left, we're even taking it from the least glary direction. This business has now turned off about 3/4 of them overnight. That only started about maybe a month or 6 weeks ago. But that turning them downward would even reduce the glare further. For new installations, there's 5 principles of lighting that we should follow. First, make sure you even need it. Second, only light the area that you need, and that can be done with the many shielded fixtures that are out there, so they don't go beyond the property where it's not needed. Use low levels of light. You don't always need to do surgery under a light outside. You need to be able to see your surroundings. And so think about the use of the light and how it's being used and how much light you need for that use. You can also use controls. Maybe the light doesn't need to be on all the time, or maybe you could use motion detection, which actually would call more attention to an intruder than always on light. And color, you want to use the warmest color applicable. So for a residential area where people are sleeping, you might use a warmer color than say for downtown Houston, where maybe you want a warm white rather than a deep amber. So, but won't bright light prevent crime? Well, this is a next door listing right after a white LED street light was set up on the street. A black Sahara Jeep Wrangler was stolen last night, and it was parked directly across the street from some houses that didn't notice. They think between about 10 and 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. probably. And at the end of this listing, it says, again, under a very bright light, it's a darn shame, stay safe. So I think what happens is as we put up these bright lights, there are lots of car burglaries because people have to hide from them. You lose your neighborhood awareness. You can use motion detection instead. Imagine we have a more subdued neighborhood, and then when someone passes by or is an intruder, this comes on. Now your neighbors are going to notice that. They don't need the thickest blackout shades, and they will be able to have much better awareness that something's going on outside. How much light do you need? Well, for a parking lot, you don't have to do surgery. You just need to be able to see if someone is there. This is from an Airbnb I stayed in Chile, and I had absolutely no problem feeling like I had absolutely edge to edge visibility, no dark shadows, and I would have known if anyone was around me in that parking lot, and I could still tell the colors of the cars if there were a crime out there. Meanwhile, very close to my house in Chimney Rock and Braeswood, these lights went up about 2 months ago. So again, it's also a matter of degree. What do you actually need? And these are on all night long, nobody's there. And I'm pretty sure that no one's staring at this bright parking lot to make sure there's not a crime. Now for a camera, if you're concerned about a camera, you can have a motion detection light come on so that you don't need this extremely bright light on all the time. And you might even stop the crime before it happens. There's some, I'm going to brush through this. I actually don't want to spend too much time on this because I'd like to get to Steve Goldberg's just one example of a retrofit to show the improvement that can be made. But this is examples of porch lights. This is one in action. You can clip on a shield just to those bright bare floodlight bulbs. This is some of the best pole mounting lighting I've seen in Houston. It is a Denny's at near Derry Ashford, 12,405 Westheimer, if you want to see them in person. The picture at the right is very close to what it looks like if you look directly up at those LEDs. Very gentle. It's this beautiful oasis of a warm glow and a sea of white glare on Westheimer. A lot of Shell stations have warmer canopy lighting. This is Rice University warm LED pedestrian lighting. That's about as clear and as uniform as you can get. So just to show what happens when you take one business and change its lighting. Do we have time for Steve Goldberg to come on and say something about this? I know I'm going long, but this is about the last thing.
Less than a minute. A new gas station went in behind the Westbury Community Garden. This is the back wall of the gas station, and they have very bright lights. And we replaced them with a wall pack. It's a shielded wall pack. And this on the right is what used to be there. So by doing that, we reduced the brightness of it. So above is the original, and then at the bottom is the new lights being installed. And here's a close-up of the back of the building with the new lights. Everything is very visible. And Debbie Moran is standing in the middle of the road back there, and you can still see that she's there. And then on the side of the building, they still have these pole lights that are at an angle, and they have the two lights on the two lights are on the side of the building, and it's overly bright. And we're talking to them about changing some of those lights also.
So I'd like to point out the visibility here with these 32 watt lights. You'd have the same visibility for two 32 watt lights on the wall there. Mine, you could eliminate the pole mounted lighting, which by the way, casts glare over the top of the Valero to drivers. The two lights on the left cast glare. They actually interfere with the security cameras at the apartments next door. So I would estimate this is probably about minimum 400 watts of light, probably 600 that could be replaced with 64 watts of light for better comfort, equal visibility, and without the interference. One other light we changed was also from the apartment complex. There was a very bright floodlight. I think this one was metal halide. It wasn't LED yet, but it's probably 150 to 250 watt light. We replaced it with a very inexpensive solution. This was $20 on Amazon.com, and it is also a floodlight, but it's 3000 K or a warmer white LED. The LEDs are recessed, and we tilted it mostly downward. We didn't want to disturb the windows at the apartment complex. Notice the difference in visibility of the field in between. These are taken about the same time of night. You can't see it very well with the white glare. With a much fainter light pointed correctly, now the entire field, which is unlit, shows up with our night vision. And finally, Art Acevedo has been actually fairly supportive. He's had a accident investigator call me after I sent in some lighting at an accident. And he also ordered a sentence in the online burglary prevention brochure. It took 9 months and 2 orders, but it says non-glare, soft lighting, and downward shielding is optimal when selecting lighting products to achieve optimal visual results. And the problem is we don't have visible education either of police officers, which is a big problem, and then from police officers to the general public. I actually think if the police were educated on how best to use light, and it's not brightness, it's shielding and what works with your eyes at night. So that high contrast actually is detrimental seeing well at night. And then here's some examples of good lighting again. The Denny's on the left, a street light in Riverside, County, California. There's not much glare on the buildings either. And one problem, so we sometimes get some pushback because the best lighting means using even less energy and fewer lights when it's used efficiently. And this can be great savings for the person buying the light, but maybe not the best advantage for the person selling the light. So we need the best education and tools possible. You need to be educated on how to deal with any pushback you might encounter. We have a Texas state law at the request of the Association of Texas Builders that prohibits regulating any building mounted lighting. Their lawyer said, well, we don't want to be forced into expensive lighting, say for low income apartments. Well, we just showed you that with a $20 light, you can light a large parking lot without keeping people awake all night. And we also we do have an exception now that either for dark sky communities like we have in Central Texas, or now they have a new exception for cities applying for dark sky status. It would be great if Houston would do that. It's a high bar. But the point I'd like to make is that this shouldn't be only for small communities. For large communities, you also have safety and health issues. And here's some websites. My own website is softlighthouston.com, and it's purely educational. And I just want to show you a little bit of what Houston could look like. This is a home I still own in Woodside. We fought for 5 years for shielded decorative lights. We're still the only community that has it within Houston city limits. And they've changed to the LED. They're still too brighter than necessary. These lights could be a little bit warmer, and they come with an optional dimmer, but we are about as good as it gets in Houston, and we could get better. On the right, my garage light, that would have been ideal for street lights, that color for in a residential area, or more amber, more similar to our our high pressure sodium. And I think I can end here. Thank you for hearing me out.
Very impressed by her presentation. The things that I could say is possibly somebody in HPD could do some research about some of the most locations where we have the most crashes at nighttime. And that might be a pilot project to put the lighting up, and if it reduced crashes on that segment of street, that might carry some serious weight, because I see retrofitting the city, no small project, but if it could be done, everything she said is so important, because most people just don't really understand the melatonin issue and how it affects our bodies. But she made a good point there, but she just briefly touched on it. So it'd be a wonderful thing. And the one other thing is, I do believe that she made a great point with the lights that were in the back of the one business interfering with the security camera at the next apartment complex. If lighting engineers set up the lighting so the cameras are more effective, so much of the time, eyewitness information or testimony is good, but eyewitnesses are difficult to get. Eyewitnesses, you have to get them to come to court. Sometimes they don't want to cooperate. Sometimes they're terrified to cooperate. When we capture something on video, that oftentimes eliminates the need for the witness. So video is becoming more and more important to our job as cameras go up everywhere. But if light blocks camera views out, then the camera is almost useless to us. Thank you, guys.